Reattraction Placebos by Jancar. Reattraction is inherently subjective, so it's impossible to control any variable of the reattraction process and make any significant objective measurements. This is why I always cringe when people start talking about reattraction science. There is hardly any science in the whole thing. Every person is different after all. For instance, being good at beer pong might make you very attractive if you're 20 and a party hound, but not if you're 50 and have 3 kids and a house. Reattraction is ultimately an emotional process and not a logical one, although logic is its side effect. This sort of process cannot be measured, quantified, or controlled, and it's why certain lines or pre-prepared text messages may work for one person but not the other. It's also why certain lines in pre-prepared texts may work on your ex one day but not the other. Now, the funny thing is that what many people pass off as reattraction science actually does work somewhat consistently, or at least it improves a person's results in the short term. Why is this so? To my knowledge, because most reattraction science techniques are simply logical placebos for creating emotional realities. Or in other words, they are ways for people to cope with their underlying emotional and self-esteem issues. Let me explain. A person doesn't know how to get their ex to like them, so they read a book telling them that one way of accomplishing that is by saying or texting some pre-prepared set of phrases. Let's call them lines for simplicity's sake. So this person then uses a line outlined in their book, gets their ex to respond positively, in other words, they reciprocate, and as a result, becomes convinced it's the line that's working, not them. But here's the kicker. Their line, whatever it is a placebo. Successful reattraction has almost nothing to do with what is said, but with how non-needy the person trying to get their ex back is when they say it. Coming back to our example, whereas the person was scared of engaging in a conversation with their ex prior, being given the line and being told that it will make their ex like them more gives them the false confidence to engage in a conversation ably. With this same confidence, this same person could successfully engage in a good conversation with just about any line. When people have problems getting their ex back, even though those problems emanate from an emotional source, they are experienced and interpreted logically, especially among men as far as I've seen. Therefore, people are apt to develop logical solutions to their emotional problems. For example, people don't interpret being afraid of permanent loss and rejection as being insecure and fearful. They interpret it as a logical problem of, I don't have the right lines, or I need a strategy for dealing with my ex when they're stubborn, in a rebound, non-responsive, have me blocked, and so forth. People then look up and research lines and strategies for these situations, giving them false non-neediness that makes them appear more attractive during their interactions. In reality, the only thing these people really needed was non-neediness to begin with. Here's another example. Being unable to connect with an ex emotionally is experienced externally as them flaking or testing you. But instead of addressing the underlying emotional issue, most people look for logical solutions to the symptoms of the problem. These logical solutions allow them to treat the symptoms and buy themselves more time to build emotional connections. When, if they built those connections to begin with, they wouldn't have to bother with all of the other nonsense. One last example. A sense of inadequacy and low self-esteem is experienced externally as saying and teasing too much and trying too hard to impress an ex. No matter how attracted they are, an average person isn't satisfied with it, so they look for logical solutions and new reattraction strategies. Now, don't get me wrong, reattraction placebos work in the short term, but fail spectacularly in the long, because they overcomplicate things and provide no permanent change. The kind of change that has to happen in someone so that their ex gets interested again. Approaching reattraction logically, in general, means making it difficult and cumbersome. The way you make reattraction simpler, however, is by realizing and addressing your underlying emotional issues. A few examples. Example 1. Instead of chasing your ex through phone calls and texts, or playing games, realize it's pointless. They either still have feelings for you, or they don't, and there is very little you can do to change that. Example 2. Instead of altering your intentions when talking to your ex and trying to game them, realize that them rejecting your reconnection attempts is a good thing, and that there is no reason to avoid it. Rejection is like a filter. It screens out lovers who aren't compatible and brings you closer to those who are. Example 3. Instead of pumping yourself up before going on a date with your ex, realize that you don't need to be pumped up. It's not your emotional state itself that's attractive. A pumped up emotional state simply makes behaving in an attractive way more likely. Spoiler, you can be in a bad mood and still be attractive. Example 4. Instead of trying to prove your value and worth to your ex, or even yourself, realize you don't have to. If you believe in your own value and worth, it will come across in everything you do one way or another. In each case, these realizations will free you from having to learn, practice, and memorize stupid lines, tactics, strategies, techniques, or anything akin to those things. Ultimately, reattraction placebos help you get over those initial bumps. The first time your ex reaches out after no contact, for instance. But once you get your conversations flowing, they become a long-term hindrance. And removing them, as well as accepting the emotional realities of reattraction head-on, is the next step to rebuilding your relationship in a way where it grows to be durable, healthy, and enjoyable.